Hey guys, welcome to Wood.Work.LIFE. It's been a while, but it's time for another hand tool shootout. And today we're looking at the number 5 plane, the jack plane, the 4 plane, the panel plane. There's a lot of different names for it, but we're gonna look at the number 5 plane, and through that we're gonna look at sort of hand planes through history. The aptly named jack plane is the jack of all trades of hand planes. It's got a short enough sole that you could use as a smoother, but oftentimes it's got a wide enough mouth where you can put in a curved iron to use it for dimensioning as a scrub plane. You could even use it for jointing short stock if you needed to. Its intended use is to remove the scallops left behind by a scrub plane before taking it to a jointer plane. Thus, they call it also a 4 plane. In reality though, you can use a jack plane for anything from scrubbing to smoothing if you have it set up right. But first, I want to thank Squarespace for making the Hand Tool Shootout series possible. It takes a lot of time, money, and effort to bring all these tools together for these hand tool shootouts. I really want to thank them for supporting small creators and pet projects like this one. I'm actually working on a website to consolidate the timeline of significant hand planes through history, and I'm hosting it through Squarespace. It's so easy to build a professional-looking site using Squarespace. You just pick a template, drag and drop photos and elements, and hit go. Is there a pet project that you want to get started on in 2019? Well, fulfill your New Year's resolution with a great new website from Squarespace. Click the link down below in the description for 10% off your first purchase and help show Squarespace what a great idea it is to continue supporting small creators like myself. Thanks. Now let's get on to the action. It's utterly impossible to go through every single historic landmark plane. Okay, so some notable exceptions off the top of my head: the Norris plane, infill planes, really anything Eastern or Scandinavian. There's a bunch of other noteworthy planes that I'm omitting, but I can't possibly list them all. Let me know if there's any noteworthy omissions you can think of in the comments. Like I said, I'm trying to collate all that together into a timeline on that new website. And if there's enough worthy omissions, maybe I'll have a follow-up video on this looking at, Eastern planes and the history of Scandinavian planes. There's some really interesting stuff out there, but it's going to be a little bit harder to get hold of in the United States. A jack plane is between 12 and 18 inches long, and this has been true since ancient times. One of the earliest complete, workable examples of a jack plane was the Goodmanham plane, named as such because it was dug up by British Petroleum on Goodmanham on the Yorkshire Wolds in England. It's an ancient Roman plane made of ivory and iron. This plane measured 13¼ inches by 2 3/8 inches. This one stands unique due to its completeness and the nature of the materials. It appears that it was more of a showpiece or owned by a rich craftsman in the area. This plane dates back to the 2nd to 4th century AD, although other planes have been found as far back as 79 AD with a plane that was found in Pompeii. Few remaining planes survive of this variety due to the nature of the materials. The iron would have rusted away and all the wood would have rotted out long ago. The bedding angle of common Roman planes was found to be between 50 and 65 degrees. This is indicative of working primarily with hardwoods, which were common to the area, although that bedding angle started to shift downward as carpenters began to work more with softer woods. As we look forward, you'll notice that not really much has changed in the design of a hand plane from the 2nd century all the way into the 18th century. Now let's jump forward 1,300 years to Sandusky, Ohio, and see what has changed. The Sandusky number 13 was manufactured exactly like the one that we have here from 1869 to 1929. It's a 16-inch by 2 5/8 inch, similar to that Roman plane, made of Ohio-grown beechwood. The only major upgrades from the 2nd century Roman planes on this are a carbon steel blade and a chip breaker. The carbon steel would have been slightly stronger and held an edge better, and the chip breaker would have prevented a little bit of chip out when planing harder woods. Almost 2,000 years and just 2 major innovations. The beech handle was also new, but many wood-bodied planes of this era didn't have handles. It was more of a personal preference thing. Many of the wood-bodied planes floating around the world aren't really made by any tool makers. Mostly they're just jigs to hold a blade whipped up by carpenters to accomplish a particular task. So the bedding angle has changed on this plane. It's closer to 43 degrees compared to the 65 degrees that was found on that Roman plane. But hand planes of this era had bedding angles all over the place depending on their use. This one was likely intended for softwoods or general purpose use. One of the more enjoyable things about a wood-bodied plane is the weight. With the lower weight and the well-waxed sole, you can really just skim through the wood like nothing's even there. The real problem with the wood body planes were a lack of precision in adjusting the depth of cut. There was no lateral adjustment mechanism, and the iron was held with a wedge and adjusted with the hammer. Really not a little pink one, but to each their own. This meant that setting the iron square and getting it to just the right depth was a little nuanced. The wood body will also potentially wear out over time. Although there are many hundreds of year-old planes still in existence, the only real challenge is planing the sole flat and gradually opening up the throat until it becomes too wide to take finishing passes. The plane would then be relegated to scrub duty, or again thrown in the burn pile, saving the irons and just building a new body. Another issue with wood body planes was the constant movement, just the nature of wood. The sole was not going to remain flat over seasons or even day to day, and the wedge would change fit based again on seasons. Thus enters the transitional plane. This was a short-lived era of hand planes. It actually kind of overlapped with the full steel body planes. But after thousands of years, the dominance emergence of tool makers like Stanley Rule and Level Company in 1843 and Leonard Bailey's many patents. Transitional planes were the first real plane to make a dent in the popular wood-bodied planes. Transitional planes introduced Leonard Bailey's lateral adjustment mechanism in 1858 and the advent of the precursor of the Bailey patented depth adjustment mechanism with the knurled brass nut that we're all familiar with in 1867. This is the first time these two features were introduced and present on one plane. This meant you no longer needed a tool to adjust the depth and the squareness of the iron, and the sole could quickly and easily be replaced when worn out. Although these planes were built to add the convenience of a steel adjustment mechanism and preserve the lower weight and feel of a wood-bodied plane, these planes did not catch on as well as the later steel planes. They were a lot more expensive and also not quite as durable as either or. This did, though, mark the beginning of Stanley and the Bailey patent planes on the global hand plane market. I actually sent one of these to my buddy Eric at Hand Tool Rescue to restore as part of a giveaway earlier on my channel. Like I said, the transitional plane didn't really have a long lifespan due to some of the shortcomings of being sort of a middle ground between the later steel planes and the earlier wood-bodied planes. Kind of went on until there was eventually the advent of the full Bailey patent steel plane, which was shortly after the transitional plane. Although the transitional planes had a short lifespan compared to some of the other planes that we're talking about today, it was an area of experimentation where a lot of the patents that later went into the Stanley patent Bailey planes in 1868, a lot of those original designs were sort of fleshed out in different forms of transitional planes. After the transitional planes, there was a long span of Stanley Bailey planes that were the common hand plane, and Stanley maintained this ruthlessly by buying up any competing patents or competing tool makers and sort of rolling them into the Stanley Rule and Level Co. as one big thing. So you'll notice that in the United States, during that early 1800s, there's just a plethora of Stanley planes with very little competition as far as any well-known or well-established brands. Stanley continued its dominance in the United States in the early 1800s, but in the mid-early 1800s, there were other competing tool companies that started to emerge. To compete with up-and-coming tool makers, and to continue with Stanley's scorched earth marketing strategy, in the late 1800s, Justice Trout and Edmund Shade improved on the Bailey patent design with the first Stanley Bedrock plane. Although this was primarily a marketing exercise, and steel-bodied planes have been around for a few decades at this point, the Stanley Bedrock plane is still widely sought after as one of the top-performing Stanley planes of all time. The defining feature of the Stanley Bedrock plane is the frog. There's a self-squaring slot on the frog to attach the base, along with self-tightening pins to attach the frog in place. This better supports the blade and potentially has less chatter when going on in a hardwood. The new frog design also allowed the frog to be adjusted while the iron was in place, allowing you to open and close the throat to prevent chip out and provide even further support to the iron. Stanley continued manufacturing the Stanley Bedrock plane and continued manufacturing in the United States until in 1937, Stanley established their operations in England. The Stanley Handyman series of plane were cheaper with plastic and painted components rather than rosewood totes and Japan sole. They're not nearly as collectible as the pre-war American Stanley planes, but they're still durable tools. Some of the components aren't as premium, but plastic is usually more durable than rosewood, more widely available. After World War II, American manufacturing of hand planes was basically over, but Stanley UK continued to produce standard bench planes until the mid-1980s. The English Stanley may not be as collectible, but they're still great user tools. With the diminishing quality of Stanley tools after outsourcing to England and eventually shutting down operations in the English factory, this presented new opportunities for other tool companies to now enter into the market and use the now public domain patents to produce new tools in the models of old, famous, or collectible Stanley designs. Chief among these was Lie Nielsen. In a market devoid of manufacturers of high-quality tools, with the rescindence of Stanley's British division and the now public domain patents they relied on, Lie Nielsen Toolworks started in 1981 to provide high-quality hand tools by manufacturing high-quality iterations of mostly classic Stanley patents. The Lie Nielsen No. 5 and 5.5 are based on Stanley Bedrock planes, along with high-quality materials like A2 steel plane irons, surgically accurate, thick, ductile iron castings that are a little bit more durable, and a lot of both beautiful and functional machined rather than cast brass fitting. The Lie Nielsen 5.5 I have here builds on a lot of features seen on premium planes over the years. Lie Nielsen isn't really about innovating in the hand plane department with features and new gizmos and gadgets. It's more of a greatest hits album of hand planes through history. Although these planes operate beautifully, they're very expensive and a little bit precious, if that makes sense. The extra material in the thick steel iron, thick sole, thick chip breaker, and just the additional material makes the Lie Nielsen versions of the hand planes much heavier than their historical analogs. This does help deliver a smooth, clean operation of the tool, but it does take them closer to tool jewelry than the beater craftsman tool that was thrown in a toolbox that they're derived from. I mean, I still bought one. With the resurgence of interest in hand tools and getting back to the roots of woodworking as CNCs and power tools dominate the craft's upper echelons, several companies have come out and started to innovate again in this space. One of the most well-known brands that's innovating the hand tool space is Veritas, adding useful features to the Stanley and Norris designs with innovations like adjustable throats and reiterating the Norris adjustment into the modern age. You also have companies like Bridge City Toolworks making tool collectors and machinists' dream tools with beautiful designed and machined pieces of collectible tool art. But there are others too, like the Swiss-made RALI 260 Evolution N Pro I have here. It's designed to be used and abused while innovating off a classic form factor and design. This is what I imagine a hand plane would be like if you stripped it down just to its basic task and re-engineered it using modern manufacturing and material techniques. The RALI Evolution N uses a laminated steel sole to maintain flatness without the weight of a cast sole. The throat is easily adjustable with a rotating mechanism ahead of the tote without any screws to loosen or tighten. All the adjustments are tool-free. It also has a clever adjustment mechanism that can be controlled with just one finger. It locks with both positive and negative adjustments, as opposed to the Bailey's adjustment mechanism. The blade on the RALI is reversible and can only lock into the chip breaker perfectly square to the sole, eliminating the need for lateral adjustment mechanism. The blades are also designed to be a consumable rather than something that can be carefully sharpened and maintained. This does get some more beginners able to make good quality shavings right off the bat, but I have kind of mixed feelings about adding a consumable to a hand plane. Operating the plane with the corrugated sole with some sort of coating on it, it's as easy as using a wood-bodied plane due to the weight of the plane without all of the additional weight of casting. But with all the convenience of a steel-bodied plane. With plastic parts and the visible screws, this is no piece of tool jewelry, but it's a hell of a user. I'm not a huge fan of introducing the consumables, but this has been done before. Some people might be turned off by the plastic totes, but plastic is a perfectly fine material for tools as long as it's done well. There are so many great hand planes from the past 100 years. And there's also some really great new ones that are innovating on a 2,000-year-old technology. But I guess the question really to ask yourself is, do you want a tool, do you want a collectible, or do you want some combination of the both? I mean, a good hand tool is like a fine violin. The patina actually adds to the value. So woodworkers, please, don't let your friends leave these on a shelf. Make sure they get a good workout every now and again. They're not that precious. Keep an eye on woodwork.life.com. I'll announce whenever I put that new website live with the timeline for all of the historical hand planes through history. I'll be looking to the comments to see more suggestions of what I need to add to those to really make sure I cover all of the cornerstone achievements in hand plane innovation over time. I want to thank again Squarespace for sponsoring this series. It's going to be really cool being able to put more time and effort into researching all these projects. I've done many hand tool shootouts in the past, So check those out in the playlist down in the description, and be sure you get subscribed so you'll get notified anytime I release a new hand tool shootout or any of my other Woodwork Life content. Thanks for watching, and remember to keep your tools sharp, keep your mind sharper.